What's going on, y'all? This is Trey Smith. I'm joined by my buddy, Josh Dobbs. We're going to have Beach Galloway, another close friend of ours, joining, moderating for us as well. We have a special guest coming on later on in the show as well. But we have a great topic we're going to get into. UFOs, UAPs, are they real? Do they pose a threat? The United States government is pretty interested in them, and I think it's worth looking into. So as we kick off the podcast, I want to start off by talking about my story. Disclaimer, I didn't care about UFOs whatsoever. I didn't care about aliens. I mean, you see the movies, man. Independence Day, Star Wars, Star Trek, heck, even Lilo and Stitch. But at the end of the day, who cares, man? So I had a situation where I was driving, and I look up, and I see a strange light. And I'm not really sure what I'm seeing. It's probably like a water tower, plane, helicopter. It could be anything, right? I keep driving. I'm looking around the road. I'm like, man, what is this thing? It's just sitting completely still. And so I'm looking at other people driving beside me, and they're looking at it too. So I'm okay. I know I'm not going crazy. So the closer we get to this object, I'm just looking at it. It's not moving. It's stationary. It's just a ball of light. About the second where I could get a good grasp of feel of like, what is this thing I'm seeing? It takes off, and boom, it's gone into a speck in one direction. I'm like, what did I just see? So once again, I didn't care about UFOs. I'm like, dude, I got to go call somebody. So I call my dad. I talked to him about 30 minutes. I called my sister. I'm like, man, y'all, I know I'm not going crazy. I just saw something I can't explain. Maybe I just saw an unidentified flying object. So after I experienced this, I'm like, you know what? Let me just look into it. Like, are there sightings in the area? What did I just witness? The curiosity starts running rampant. So I go into a really deep rabbit hole of too many podcasts, way too much research at the time. It was the off season. I had the time on my hands. Why not? And I was able to just sort of find some facts. It was like, okay, it's a little creepy, man. So what really is it? So I'm gonna go ahead and open it up for Dobbs. Dobbs, what do you think, man? UAPs, UFOs, are they real? What are they, man?
All right, so what's up, y'all? Josh Dobbs. I first want to dive into your story because I think your story is very consistent with everyone's story that says they see a UFO, a UAP, whatever they're called nowadays. So, Trey, your story, where were you? Like, where did you see this object?
Yeah, I was driving from Kansas City all the way into Dallas.
So you're in Kansas. So my thing is, like, I feel like, and this is going to start this off, every time there's a UFO sighting, obviously we have, which is going to be Trey's point later, the different reports from military pilots. But for the most part, it's always just in random cities, right? Middle of nowhere, Kansas, middle of nowhere, Iowa, out in New Mexico and all these random spots. And I do think, I do think, when you're driving down a road and you're probably pretty bored driving down the same street, you can definitely look up and perceive a lot of things that aren't really there. So my thoughts are this, I think, are there devices out there flying that the general public is unaware of? Yes. That probably certain people in the government aren't privy to? Yes. Now, I think it goes to, the initial thought of this conversation. All right, where are these things coming from? Me, I think anything that's flying that we've seen, I think it's from some created by humans to fly on Earth. I don't believe that if you see a UFO, you see an object is flying, I think it can be considered unidentified, but I don't believe it came from another world.
Yeah, I think it's important to add some context for some viewers out here that aren't familiar with your story, Josh. Josh is not your regular NFL quarterback. He was an aerospace engineering degree at the University of Tennessee, a Torchbearer recipient as well. Also interned with NASA and completed that as well. So Dobbs is not your normal quarterback when it comes down to the subject. He's overqualified for it. Now, segueing into American culture with quote-unquote aliens, UFOs, right? So I think it's important for the viewers in terms of context to lay down where did all this begin, where did the quote-unquote hysteria begin as well. And once again, we got a preseason game on Saturday. There's so much information that I had to get. I don't have time for this, man. I got to be in my playbook, but
hey,
bear with me, guys. Yeah, man. Dude, bear with me, bro. I'm going to pull up the document that I have, but I'll probably go from there. But
okay,
let's talk about, first and foremost, let's get into the Kenneth Arnold situation. I think this is what paints the story of quote-unquote UFOs, unidentified flying objects in America. So what I gathered and found was in 1947, there's a private pilot by the name of Kenneth Arnold. and he took off from Chehalis, excuse my pronunciation, Washington, on his way to an air show in Pendleton, Oregon, with another stop allowing him to refuel his plane. He was piloting a single-engine light airplane, and it's important for his credibility as well to mention that he was an experienced pilot with over 4,000 hours of flight time logged prior to this point. He was also part of a search and rescue team at the time to find a downed plane that had about 32 Marines, had a $5,000 reward. So shortly before 3 p.m., he circled around about 20 miles west of Mount Rainier when a flash catches his eye. And in quotes, he says, "It startled me. I just assumed it was some military lieutenant out in a shiny P-51, and I caught the reflection of the sun hitting off his wings. Upon further inspection, he was able to rule out an airliner plane because multiple lights and objects began to appear. He saw 9 total objects flying in an echelon formation, sort of like this. Arnold described each object as circular about 100 feet across with no discernible tail. The objects periodically flip, banked, and weave side to side like the tail of a Chinese kite." So the formation was crossing in front of Arnold, and he decided to time his passage from Mount Rainier to Mount Adams. He calculated the objects were flying around 1,200 miles per hour. Some accounts say the objects were flying 1,700 miles per hour due to his calculations. So, Dobbs, what are your thoughts on the Kenneth Arnold story? This is just the first one we're getting into, but what do you think Kenneth Arnold really saw?
Man, I can't speak on anyone else and what they saw, right? I think you bring up some good points, right? Like, he says these devices were moving at 1,200 miles per hour, which I don't know how you would just know. Obviously, that same year, we were able to break the sound barrier when the first human-created craft with the X-1. Those specific things, right? I can't speak on what someone sees, but I'm also like, okay, I need a little bit more proof than one guy telling me things were moving 1,200 miles per hour. I think that's just my personal opinion, right? I think there's a lot of stories out there. But also, I will say around that time is, to your point, pop culture, flying saucers, a lot of things were hot then around aliens, UFO sightings. So I think that also plays into the hysteria bug that started around 1947. And then I think that grew into obviously like the Roswell sightings. And then from there, then obviously, it catches wind with Hollywood. And then from there, really the sky's the limit to, as we talked about, just human imagination.
Okay, so I'm going to interrupt here real quick. Dobbs and Trey have done a great job of painting the history of UAPs and UFOs in America. But one thing that is lacking from some of the historical encounters with UAPs is the burden of proof. And that's something that changed for the UFO UAP community back in 2017 with the New York Times article exposing the UAP task force, and for the first time getting the civilians real video evidence and testimonials from military pilots of what they're seeing, how unique this technology is, and that it's real. The government prior to 2017, and even in the year following 2017, had never publicly acknowledged unidentified flying objects in any formal setting. And that all changed with the New York Times article, Lou Elizondo, Christopher Mellon, and everybody that we see in the news now. We're going to be joined here shortly by a guest that's going to explain this in a lot more detail, but I am curious of both of you guys' opinions on the recent military encounters with Commander David Fravor, Lieutenant Ryan Graves, and what you guys think those encounters are, because our government has gone as far as saying on multiple accounts that they don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think they know or are aware. I think, their military encounters are unique, and definitely when you hear them, they can be scary to a point where what is this technology out there that not even our own pilots here in the United States know what is going on, whether it's just outside our capital in Washington, D.C. or off the coast of San Diego. Yeah, I think it's crazy to think about what are these pilots seeing. But, I will say, our government, other countries, as they develop this technology, they have also had the habits of not sharing all the information with the technology that they're rapidly creating. We've had the B-2 stealth bomber, we had the X-30 Roswell, 1993. We had the X-33 Lockheed Martin, 2001. We had NASA going X-36, X-38, X-43, X-46. Then we had the X-47A, X-47B. If you look up all of these crafts, some of them are manned, some of them are unmanned. Many of these crafts are built for supersonics, to go faster than the speed of sound, several times faster than the speed of sound. It's talking Mach 2, 3, 4, and up, right? So if we're creating these technologies that only certain parts of our government, of our R&D know about, then for other people seeing this, then it will come across as technology not from this earth, technology not from this world. And mind you, every single one of these planes that I listed have all flown or been in service for the last 50 years.
Yeah, for sure. I think as civilians, we're sort of on a need-to-know basis at times. I mean, there's some things our government does that we don't need to know in terms of innovation for our own private security and safety. I think also just like, once again, going back to military accounts and testimony, when you look at the cases of Lieutenant Graves and Commander Fravor, I mean, a lot of the stuff they're saying is really compelling. Like, Graves was talking about how once they updated their radar system, they were seeing these objects constantly, every day, suspended against hurricane force winds, doing maneuvers once again that are unlike anything. And I mean, he's gone so far as to say, like, he created a nonprofit organization filled with aerospace engineers, doctorate degree people as well, in terms of like figuring out what this is. I mean, he's compelled from the standpoint that they're just trying to make sure there are safe measures because they don't know what these things are. If they are programs and things that our government is building, you know, that presents a threat to them and their safety as well, just in operating and basic training and military exercises while flying.
So let me jump in real quick. So basically, the main pervading thoughts here surrounding Commander David Fravor's case and Lieutenant Graves' case are: could it be secret U.S. intelligence? Could it be foreign adversaries? Or could it be something else? I'm going to just go ahead and say, if we believe the testimonials from either of them, the objects that they're describing are hundreds of years advanced from any technology that we have. I mean, these things are traveling at speeds that would flatten a human if there was a human inside them. So we either have to think,
big enough for a human.
Well, the Tic Tac object is. The other objects are not. If this thing is actually flying at a speed where it's picked up on a radar 60 miles away in a second, that's not technology that we have. I mean, China creates drones that are consumer drones that we buy, that I have right here, and they fly like drones. I mean, it is fine, but it has a battery.
Again,
government drones that we have, we currently build them. We spend billions of dollars in our military, and if we had a technology that was hundreds of years advanced, we would have it. So we know it's not us.
Yes, but you haven't given me where your source you think it's coming from is.
Like, the source is bunk, man. Like, at the end of the day, it's just like, this is happening. The people in charge, the people who are out there actually engaging in our military are witnessing these things and have no freaking idea what it is. Screw the source. I'm just saying, do you think it's real? Do you think UAPs are real, Josh? Do you think people are saying, you think everyone's lying? You think it's a hoax?
I never said that. And I said, I never said that. I started off this conversation saying I believe UFOs are real in the standpoint that they are listed, unidentified flying objects. Is an object I look up to the sky, and I don't know where that object came from or what it is. I think, yeah, those are real. Now, saying they came from another alien civilization, I'm not saying, I'm saying I strongly disagree with that. But I am saying there are things flying that the average civilian and the everyday pilot can look at and not be able to identify.
Well, Congressman, thank you once again for joining us on this podcast. We just want to basically take the moment out, just say thank you. And once again, you are one of the leading people in Washington, pretty much spearheading the UAP debate in terms of what they are, how we're going to keep progressing in the subject matter, as well as just addressing, do they pose a threat to our domestic safety here in America? So we just want to thank you for that. But also, what are the next steps in terms of the UAP debate? I know we saw the UAP, I keep saying that, subcommittee and the different things and the testimonies that came out of it. What are the next steps in Washington?
Well, thank y'all for having me on, first of all. I've watched y'all in the field for years. My 6 years of undergraduate studies at the University of Tennessee, I accomplished a lot of things, and I would have played for the University of Tennessee except because I was the captain of the 1982 Bearden High School football team. We went 5-5. Y'all might have heard of me. Where do we go from here? We've asked for a special committee, which would be a select committee, which would give us subpoena powers to call people in and give them some a little bit of comfort on the whistleblower thing, because the whistleblower situation is a dangerous situation. They claim you have whistleblower protection, but the reality is you really don't have much. You end up like David Grush, and somebody from the intelligence community leaks something about your past. He has post-traumatic stress syndrome.
So when you say bring people in, now are you saying you guys are working to put together bringing people in that the people that have seen the UAPs and the UFOs and are reporting these things to have them actually testify?
Yeah, and that's what we had before. The three people we had, we had two pilots, and they are the ones on those Tik Tok videos, not TikTok, not like the Chinese communist propaganda.
And when they're seeing these things, what? And I will just be frank, because we were just going back and forth pretty heatedly about what are if you had to say what would you say? What would you say these things that they're seeing are?
Well, all I can do is quote the sworn testimony by one of the best pilots in the world, who said, "It's nothing that I've ever seen. It's nothing our adversaries have." I mean, honestly, Josh, you're a freaking astronaut. I mean, you're a scientist. You get it. They hover for hours. They can take off, go to 3, go to 5, Mach 5. And honestly, if the Russians had it, Putin wouldn't be in this worthless war in Ukraine. He'd land a UFO on the front steps of the White House. He'd get out bare-chested, probably ride a unicorn over, wrestle Joe Biden, get unicorn, ride back into that UFO and fly over. If it was China, China would own us.
So I guess my question is, Trey and I both watched the hearing, and there were 3 different answers on the reception of the information. So Mr. Grush obviously has said that he's had a lot of threats to his life, incredible threats, but Commander Fravor and Lieutenant Graves both said that they had good experiences, that they'd been received with open arms about this. What's the disconnect between both of their testimonials?
Okay, I can tell you pretty much. With the 2 pilots, they kept their mouth shut, and they said that those Tic Tac videos didn't exist. The Pentagon did, and then it was leaked, and I'm pretty sure I know who did it, but it was leaked, and then they called. I think it was Fravor. I called him back in and said, "Hey, the Pentagon said they didn't exist." And then they came out and said, "No, these are fake." And then they got the audio and could hear the voices on there. And then they went to him and said, "Hey, is this real?" He said, "Yeah, it's me." And then the Pentagon was forced to show their hand. And this is the same Pentagon that says they don't exist, but it is the same Pentagon that's asking for funding to study it. So, and you got to watch Chuck Schumer. Schumer's got a bill, and all the UFO people are, "Oh, this is great." He wants to develop a clearinghouse where all the UFO information goes to, and then they decide if it's a national security threat or not to put it out. Well, guess what? It's all a national security threat. They are not going to allow anything out. This is just another layer of government between you and the issue of UFOs.
Yeah. I think one of the most frustrating things is that if these things exist and they're out there, I think we're almost beyond that point. I mean, you're listening to the testimonies of Commander Fravor, Lieutenant Graves, various reports. We even went down to Roswell. That's something I've looked into as well. I know Beach and I talked about the Orson Welles report that came out that one time, the radio broadcasting, and the reaction of the American people. Yeah, the War of the Worlds broadcast. Congressman, do you think that that's in play? Or do you think that it's more so for the benefits of the quote-unquote shadow people in the government that are controlling all this to have access to the capabilities in this technology?
I think it's several of those things, but it feeds into the ability of them to keep it secret. No matter what their angle is, if it gets to the same conclusion for the big boys and girls, then they're fine. I couldn't agree with you more on what you said, though. That's you figure, they're up at Kenny Bunkport or Martha's Vineyard, and they're in their corduroy jacket with the sleeve, with the elbow sleeves, and they're smoking their pipe, sitting around and talking about us little people and how we can't handle it, and we need to keep this under wraps, because people would riot. I mean, I was told that it was kind of weird. I was in the tunnel, one of the tunnels, Capitol. They're public, you know, they're open now since COVID, whatever, after COVID. But and it was kind of weird. A guy walked up to me that I knew and said, you know, Tim, he said, we really don't need to put this stuff out. And I was like, what? He said, yeah. He said, people couldn't handle it. There'd be riots. And I'm like, riots by who? You know, I could go to East Knoxville and have a forum on it. I could go to West Knoxville and have a forum. I could go to Loudon, Lenoir City, Dandridge, you know, wherever. I can Claiborne County or Granger County. You know what? People would say, I think there's something out there. I want to know the dadgum answer. I don't care their color, their socioeconomic background, or anything else.
I agree. I know we're basically already touching up on it, but with the UAP task force set up, is there a consensus that this is non-human intelligence, that these are not anything relative to this earth or created on this earth?
Among congressmen there is, I feel, but I don't believe in the intelligence community they're permitted to say that. Again, I'm a born-again Christian. Jesus died for me on the cross. I believe that, so I don't have a problem with any other beings. It doesn't disrupt, but they always throw that in.
So, Congressman, I guess the big sort of thesis here is that we, as civilians, are supposed to believe, when the report came out on the UAP task force, that of the 140 some odd encounters, they only knew an explanation for one of them. Are we supposed to take that at face value and say the government is being truthful, they really have no idea? Or are we supposed to assume that that was a fabricated report and they actually do know what these things are?
Well, I'm going to go much deeper. I think they've recovered something, and I think that it's been passed on. I don't think it's of recent. I've been told many times there's maybe a radar or radio technology that mess with these things that could bring them down, and they think that's what happened at Roswell. And so maybe we didn't even know it. We didn't know we were doing it at the time. And so I think it's been passed on. I think it's compartmentalized. Y'all know where Oak Ridge National Laboratory is, right? It's Big Ed.
Absolutely.
It's right down the road. Well, that's where they did the atomic bomb. Had, I think, 2,000 people there. And believe it or not, there's probably only less than a handful of people actually knew that they were working on the atomic bomb. So fast forward to today, that stuff has been compartmentalized for years, since maybe the 40s or the 50s, which depends on who you talk to, where some other craft were found. So that's passed on to businesses that have huge multi-billion-dollar contracts through our government defense. I go back to the Pentagon. It fails every audit. Something's happened to that money, and they call it change orders, where they change an order, and they automatically just pay them more, and that's the way it works. We just print more money and pay these people more money. And I submit to you that money's going somewhere. And if you follow the money, if you extrapolate that compartmentalization, that the people who knew that they were working on a UFO or whatever, those people have died. There's a lot of deathbed confessions you can read. There's some really documented people.
Yep. I know a lot of times during David Grush's testimony, he was talking about how he couldn't disclose certain information a multitude of times. One thing I was thinking, I'll be correct me wrong, did you guys ever get a chance to do private skiff meetings with Grush where you could disclose where, quote unquote, these crafts, all these things are actually stored and housed?
I've written a letter because they've stopped us from doing that, Trey, and thanks for asking that. So he was denied. Apparently, they've told us that his clearance has been revoked or expired, which is really kind of weird because you have congressmen that you keep your security clearance. Sometimes after Congress, I forget how it works, but I have a security clearance. I have, I can go in places. I've been in the skiff. We went down to the big base down in Florida. Myself and Congressman Matt Gaetz and Congressman Luna. They're both from Florida. And we were literally denied. We were told we were going to get briefed on a UFO issue, and we were basically, they turned us away. They had the meeting, and it was about some other scary stuff that was pretty bad, and yet we turn around, and Matt got on the phone and called the Pentagon and some of the people over there, and then that general brought in those pilots, and they briefed us on what they'd seen. And again, it always comes down to, this is nothing that we have, and it's nothing that that anybody on this planet has. And I could always remember, I leaned over to Matt, and I said, because there was probably CIA, I'm not sure, I'd say it had to be CIA or NSA. And I said, the spooks are getting nervous. And that's the old terminology for those old timey, suits and I said, the spooks are getting nervous. You could see them over in the corner. They were kind of, because when they started talking about how they were interrogated for 8 hours, they're supposed to be debriefed, and they're literally penalized when they see that I've talked to pilots that said I've literally had to destroy tapes because I'll have to be, pulled off the flight. Those guys don't make a lot of money, and they're pulled off the flight line, and they get a blemish on their record, and they get humiliated by their peers. And they tell me they don't even want to see them anymore because there's been in some areas off the Gulf Coast, and there's an area off the Pacific where they saw them for quite a regular amount of time, and they would hover for hours, which we don't have any capability of doing. And then they would just take straight up, and they would take off and take at these incredible speeds and things. So
do you think there will be at any point then, like, answers to the questions that we're asking, or we'll ever find out, or will it just be a book left open?
I think it'll be a book left open. I just think it's gone too long, and they will not, until somebody walks out with the proof, Josh. This thing is just too big, and too many people are vested. I think the issue's been covered up. Again, I go back to the Kennedy assassination. They know Kennedy was shot, and yet they keep saying, well, Oswald did it. He acted alone, but they will not release the files that tell what exactly happened.
So why hide it, right? Why not answer the questions? Why not? Why if there are vehicles coming from other planets with non-human organisms flying them, why hide it? Why not tell
That's
us?
Great question. You're a scientist. Imagine if I came up, what the implications would be if I came up with an energy source, as in the Tik Tok videos, that has no heat signature, that's capable of producing incredible speeds, G's and things we just don't understand, that can stay afloat hours upon hours or whatever. And imagine what that would do to our energy companies in this country. You lived in Knoxville. Those oil tanks down on Middlebrook, we wouldn't need them. It'd put everybody out of business, and the Pentagon especially would be out of business. All these missile defense contractors out of business. Because we wouldn't be going to war over in the Middle East for oil anyway. And I think it put a lot of people out of business. It's a dirty.
So money ploy is what you're kind of saying. It's like,
yeah.
But when it, yeah.
That's me.
That's interesting.
Ask me what I thought. I've gone.
No, for real. I asked you what I thought because I wanted to know. Yeah, I'm just like, because I'm curious, right? Like, no matter what side of the coin you're on, just me being an engineering mind, right? There's if there's a device, right? There's reasons for that device flying, and so it's like you want to know the source. I want to know the source, right? Like me and Trey, we might sit on opposite sides of this topic. For our upbringings and whatever we believe in these topics, but in the day we both want to know like the source. So I'm just always interested, like, if they are coming from other planets, if that is the answer, like, why don't we just have more proof of that? That the public is allowed to see.
I mentioned that earlier, and I've talked to a lot of people that are in the scientific community that deal with this. And they think that there hasn't been any brought down recently, and the ones that were brought down by radio frequencies that we used back then, and maybe we don't use now.
It's just a hypothetical question. There's been proven points in history where like the 80s, right, and like the 60s, right, we were developing planes that didn't come out to the public until the 80s, and the 80s were developing planes that didn't come out to the public until the 2000s. So it's like, And I'm just saying, hypothetically, if what would you say if like in 20 years, right, it came out like this was just experimental technology to go into these type of military aircraft? Do you think that is a possible answer to the question, just based off of what history has shown over the past 60 years, or do you think that's not even on the table just by the nature of this type of technology?
I would, except for the fact that the human body would not be able to survive those G's.
But what if it was unmanned craft, which is very popular?
Yeah,
nowadays?
unmanned craft, exactly. But the ability to fly, Mach 0 to Mach 5 in just a couple of seconds. The ability to hover for hours upon end. We don't have anything that does that.
So are we just going to get like one video every 9 months until we're dead? Or is anything going to come out?
They're not going to put out too much. I think the Tic Tac video is probably about it for right now.
I'll tell you, I don't believe that it's foreign. I don't think it's Chinese or Russian. If it's ours, then we should never have a problem again in this country, because we would become the biggest superpower in the world, like the Congressman said. I don't think it's ours. So you're left to whatever you want to believe. It came from another planet. It's, future technology. It's something that defies any conventional laws of physics that we're aware of. And the government has gone as far as saying that it is real. Commander Fravor saw something that went way faster than anything we've ever seen. We've said that much. I just want to see a little more, and like the Congressman said, I don't know that we're going to see it, which is why we're left to having podcasts like this to talk about.
I think we all want to see it.
Yeah, we definitely all do. We always want answers. We want disclosure. That's it.
I want answers.
Yep. Well, hopefully we will find some more soon, and thank you to Congressman Burchett for being the biggest voice in Washington on this issue and taking some time out to talk with us. I would love to, I speak for Josh and Trey, to speak with you more about this in the future, and hopefully we can see you in Knoxville this fall for a game.